Sandra from Sesala Design or DIY, and today I have a special video for you. But first, let me introduce myself. I'm just a person who's following a lifetime passion through this channel. It passed such a long time since I designed or sew a formal gown, I kind of miss that. So, because that time of the year was almost here, no, not this time of the year, I decided to make a Halloween costume. My first thought about making a Halloween costume was like 3 or 4 months ago. I started to sew it only 4 weeks before because I had a lot of second thoughts. My first concern was about what should I make with the costume after, because I didn't want to wear it once and forget about it in my closet. The second one was that I didn't have where to wear a scary costume. So that's when I've decided to make this dress. This is a dress that Grace Kelly wore in the movie Rear Window, directed by Alfred Hitchcock and designed by iconic costume designer Edith Head, but with a few adjustments. I separated each piece. One of the reasons why I've chosen this dress was because I love the combo black and white, and this dress kind of reminds me of Christian Dior's new look, which is one of my favorite moments in fashion history.
Plus, I've watched The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel recently and I've become obsessed with these dresses.
So, let's dive in.
If you want to make this dress, this is what you'll need. And now the pattern. I will start with the bodice, which I wanted to be separated from the skirt, so I could wear it more than once. I used to make this pattern the basic bodice sloper, and of course the sleeve sloper too. After this, I went to make the skirt. And to make the pattern of this skirt, I have a more in-depth video about this that I will link above. The only difference is that for this skirt I doubled the values. Instead of making only a semicircle skirt, I made 2, which results in a full skirt, and I gathered them to have more volume. Now let's get to the sewing part. For the bodice, first I started with a dart. Then I sew it on the sides. I used the serger for each stitch, and I went to sew the sleeves. I used the serger for the sides of the sleeves. Next, I sewed the hem of the sleeves very close to the edge. I attached the sleeves to the bodice and put at good use the serger again. To close the neckline of the bodice, I used 2 straps of the same fabric. The straps has the following length and width. More precisely, I will use them to cover half of the bodice, back and front. I started from the middle and pinned it to the other side. I did the same for the other half. Also, I've sewed the edges of each strap to the other one. Now that I finished attaching the binding, I cleaned the edge. and I made a top stitch. Moving to the skirt. The skirt has two layers, one layer of satin duchess and one of chiffon. I started by measuring where to cut the skirt using the instructions I told you before. And I repeated the same steps for the chiffon too. The only difference between the two layers is that the lining has one more cut in the middle of the back skirt where I will place the zipper. I also made a facing, applying the same rules as for the skirt. I pinned the sides of the skirt and I sew it. I pressed each stitch. For my fabric, it wasn't necessary to use the serger, but I recommend you clean the edges or use a French seam. I use a serger instead for the facing. I press it. And I sew 2 loose stitches at the upper part of the skirt for both layers to help me gather it. Next, I made a small opening at the back of the chiffon, long as my zipper. And I attached the facing to the chiffon. And afterward the lining. I sew it. I use the serger for the center back edges and the waistline. I also made an understitch. The following step was to attach the zipper. I pinned the chiffon to the lining. And I placed the zipper. I always sew the zipper 2 times, once with a regular zipper foot and twice with an invisible zipper foot. And because the chiffon was fraying, I've cleaned the edge. I pinned the facing to the zipper and the back of the lining, but I also included a little bit of the chiffon. I sew the facing with the invisible zipper foot and close the skirt with a regular zipper foot. I pressed everything. The last step was to make the hem of the lining and the chiffon. And press it. The next step was making the petticoat. I used 2 types of tulle for this, a stiff one and the soft one. I started by cutting a piece of fabric to make the waistband. The length of the waistband is the circumference of my hips plus seam allowance. I cut the first ruffle and it has 2 layers of tulle, one soft and one stiff. That's because this first layer will be in direct contact with my skin and I want it to feel soft, plus this extra layer will sustain the weight of the rest of the petticoat. I started to cut all the layers of tulle that I needed and I began to sew it. First is the waistband. Second, I sewed a loose stitch that will allow me to make a gather later. I close the sides for each layer. I press the waistband and I attach the first layer of the tulle to the waistband, but I left a small opening unsewed to insert later the elastic. I sew the first layer, I attach and sew the second one too, and I inserted the elastic. I sewed the elastic and closed the waistband. I used the serger to clean the edges. And this is the first ruffle of the petticoat with the tulle layers, plus the waistband. I made the loose stitches to gather the fabric. And I closed the sides. I gather it and attach it to the first ruffle. I use the serger again. And I repeated the same process for the biggest third ruffle. And the final step was to make the lace. Because I couldn't find the right pattern of lace that I wanted, or the one that was kind of similar to what I wanted had a delivery period over 1 month, I've decided to create my own. I grabbed some pieces of lace and some beads, and I started to sew them, having in mind this inspiration. Each one is different but similar somehow. Now that I finished sewing them, I've grabbed a pair of scissors and started to prepare them. I didn't want to sew them to the skirt as I planned initially, so I decided to sew them to the belt. I bought a regular thin belt. I covered it in the same fabric as the bodice. I made a few adjustments. I marked where to sew the lace and I sew it, and I used some hairspray to try to keep them in place. And now I'm gonna show you the dress. I completed the outfit with a pearl collar, sleeves and some black high heels, and I was ready to party. Remember when I told you that the costume has separated pieces? These are alternative ways to wear different pieces of this costume. And that's it. I hope that you enjoyed today's video, and if you have any questions or advice, as usual, my comment section is open. Don't forget to subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and share if you learn something new you find useful. Until next time, let's find inspiration.